Welcome to the Unfiltered Show from the Score Studios. My name is Joseph Casciaro, and our guest today covers the Knicks for the New York Post, Stefan Bondy. Thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, man. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm assuming just like every NBA market, you guys are kind of ramping up for the season to start out there, training camp or media day like a week away.
That's right. Mondays, they don't even call it media day with the Knicks. They call it content day. And then they're immediately flying out to Charleston, South Carolina for training camp, which lasts about a week. And then they have a preseason game in Charlotte right after that. So it's really ramping up. I mean, they didn't always go to destinations for training camp. This is the second straight year they're going to Charleston, South Carolina. But obviously they had a good season. It worked out, so they're going back.
Any specific reason why they chose Charleston even last year, like to start? Was there like a connection there, or?
Well, I mean, there is a connection. Back in the 1990s, even before that, it started. They used Charleston, South Carolina. Pat Riley was people that decided to go there back when he took over, and Tom Thibodeau was actually an assistant under Jeff Van Gundy when they used to go down there. I don't know how much of a role that played in them going back. I think Charleston has become kind of a destination for some of these teams. The Sixers went there before the Knicks did under Doc Rivers, so they train at the Citadel, which my understanding I heard they're making some big upgrades to the gym over there. So it's just a good spot. It's a spot to get away. No distractions. You get, when you go to these destination training camps, you get a lot of team bonding, events and experiences. So, that was kind of the thinking behind going back to Charleston.
Well, obviously, a lot of excitement for Knicks fans, anyone who's kind of been watching this team based on the way the last couple of years have gone, trading for Mikal Bridges, a lot of build up towards content day, not media day, and training camp. But a week before that camp opens, some bad news, I guess, in Knicks land. Fill us in on what the update was with Mitchell Robinson yesterday with respect to his timeline recovering from that ankle surgery.
Yeah, so first of all, he had his first surgery. He suffered a stress reaction in his ankle back in December. That was in a game in Boston. And I remember covering that game. I followed him into the locker room and I saw him in the x-ray room. And at the time, it was like, this is not that big of a deal. But then a couple days later, find out the diagnosis was pretty dire. He had to have surgery. That was back in September. He came back in March. And in retrospect, it's like, hey, maybe you came a little bit back a little bit too early. But he wanted to come back for the playoffs. He got into that first round against Joel Embiid. There was some physical play there. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was that takedown play that Joel Embiid brought down Mitchell Robinson. That might have been the play where he re-injured himself because like right after that game, he left the arena in a walking boot. And
He
then
also he
about
also had the play
a
where he flopped
later,
and landed in his ankle, right? Yeah.
it was a dirty game, and that was the game. There was a lot of controversy after that because it was like, how the heck did Joel Embiid not get ejected? And the Sixers ended up winning that game. Of course, the Knicks ended up winning the series, but he left that game in a walking boot, and then he actually tried to play the next game. He was hobbling all over the place, and then a couple weeks later, we find out he had another surgery. This was a follow-up surgery. They called it at the time a minor procedure, and he was supposed to be ready for camp. And now yesterday, I had heard rumblings, hey, he's not on schedule. He's not doing as well as they would have hoped. But then yesterday, the new update was that he won't be back until December or January. So this is a guy who, he's had surgeries to both feet now. He's been injury prone throughout his time, especially the last 4 years, NBA. And when you mix big men centers and injuries to feet, it's usually not a good mix. When he's healthy, he's a heck of a player. He's a heck of a defender. He's a top-notch offensive rebounder. But the key with him is being healthy. And now the Knicks don't have their starting center to start the season.
Yeah, and is there any concern? Because that was going to be one of my questions. You kind of answered it about whether this was a setback or if it was, kind of the plan all along for him to come later in the season. It sounds like, based on what you're saying, it wasn't the plan for him to miss the beginning of the season. So is there any concern about, like, the long-term effects or even the throughout this season, like, considering he's already, a few months off course?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate on like, what a doctor would know and
Yeah.
what kind of concerns there are on that level. I just know, having covered the NBA for, almost 15 years, that when you mix in somebody who's had foot problems and has had multiple surgeries at this point, it's usually not a good sign for the future. And listen, this is a guy I think he'd be better off trying to lose some weight, and trying to keep as much weight as possible off those ankles. At the same time, the way that he plays for the Knicks, I mean, it calls for physicality. I mean, he's under the basket banging with the likes of Joel Embiid, like I mentioned, banging with Nikola Jokic, and his job is to basically just be physical under the rim. And when you have that type of game, and you have that type of injury riddled feet and lower leg situation, it's usually like, maybe we should be concerned. And I think that's what the Knicks are feeling right now.
Yeah, I mean, this Knicks team's obviously very deep, but I guess one area where they're suddenly looking thin is at the center spot. I mean, you consider Isaiah Hartenstein now in Oklahoma City, Mitchell Robinson on the shelf to start the season. Like, is Precious Achua now the starting center? Does Jericho Sims get more of an opportunity? Does a Tibbs team finally go small and start Randle at center, even though he's kind of coming off a shoulder issue as well? What's your take on all that?
Yeah, I mean, you just hit on the three options there. Precious Achua is naturally a power forward, but actually, when we spoke to him last year, he said, "I'm a power forward." Like, he'd prefer to play power forward. And you get that a lot when you talk to traditional power forwards about them wanting to play center. Usually, they don't want to do it because it's a lot more physical and you get injured. But he filled in last season when Julius Randle got hurt at power forward, and then there were also situations where Isaiah Hartenstein got hurt last season with his Achilles, and he filled in pretty well. So he's an option, but he's undersized. Jericho Sims is the only traditional center on the roster right now. And when I say traditional center, I mean size and the ability to protect the rim. And with Tom Thibodeau, since he's taken over here in New York, that's been his philosophy. He's going to have a traditional center on. He's going to protect the rim, and he's going to prioritize rebounding. With that being said, he just came out in an interview and understanding, the situation at center. He said, we're going to have to put Julius Randle at the 5 sometimes. And I don't think he's going to want to do it for very long. I think that, it presents a lot of advantages for the Knicks offensively. Defensively, there's going to be some disadvantages. But I think when you touched on those three options, Precious Achua, Jericho Sims, and Julius Randle, I think that's how they're going to handle this to start the season, kind of center by committee.
Yeah, and I guess the one, I know obviously there'll be defensive drawbacks, but the one positive offensively, other than spacing the floor, is that if you move Randle to center, it probably allows the Knicks to play something like their 5 best players all at once, or at least their 5 best with Robinson out, as opposed to, starting Sims or an Achua at center and having to figure it out from there.
100%. And not only that, it translates all the way down the roster, because you have a situation where you have really a glut of guards right now. I mean, Dante DiVincenzo, he was a great player at the second half of last season. Well, he was starting. He was playing over 30 minutes per game in the second half of last season. He led the Eastern Conference in three-pointers in the second half of last season. And now, how's he going to get on the court? You got Mikal Bridges at the 2. You got Jalen Brunson at the 1. They're not going to get off the court very often. OG Anunoby's going to be at the 3. One way you can move things around is putting Julius Randle, like you said, one of their best players, at the 5 to find more time on the court for Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart, who will also be coming off the bench.
Taking it all into account, looking at the roster as a whole and the rotation, even considering Robinson's injury, what are the expectation, or what do you think the realistic expectations for this team are? Because it's one thing for a fan to say, okay, this is it. This is the year they end the drought. And listen, they finished second in the East last year. If it wasn't for injuries in the playoffs, they probably had the best chance to beat Boston in the East. They go out and trade for Mikal Bridges. Like, do you think this team should have genuine championship aspirations this season, or do you still see them as kind of like that tier 2 contender?
I mean, I can't put them above Boston. I can't say they're going to beat Boston. Yeah. And if I put them in a playoff series against Boston, I'd pick Boston to win. So with that being said, this team, this franchise, hasn't been to an Eastern Conference final since 2000. That's 24 years. I think that should be the goal. I think that should be the bar. They've been eliminated in the second round the last 2 seasons. In order to make progress, in order to say, hey, this was a successful season, the Knicks need to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think, Jalen Brunson even said it. He said that's the goal. And I think that's a fair goal. And I think it's a very realistic goal. a lot of things would have to break positively to get into the NBA Finals and win a championship. I don't think that that would be very realistic this season. You know, they are in everybody. If you look at the roster, they're all in their prime. They're all in their 20s. So I think this does have some sustainability to it. I think that they can be back next year. But as far as this year, in order to take a step forward, in order to define success for 2024, 2025, it has to be Eastern Conference Finals.
We were talking Sixers on last week's episode, and everyone kind of came to the agreement that the Knicks and the Sixers, and maybe the Bucks as well, are in that second tier where they're genuine contenders, but they're a notch below Boston. Obviously, the Sixers and the Knicks met in last year's playoffs. The banged up Knicks and beat the banged up Sixers, and then the Knicks get Mikal Bridges and the Sixers get Paul George. How do you? I know it's only not even October, let alone April, but how do you see those two teams matching up, not just in a potential future playoff series, but over the course of the year? Would you still give the Knicks the edge over the Sixers, or do you think that's more of a toss-up?
I don't think the Sixers are going to be healthy. I don't think they're going to get into the playoffs come, April, May, and have Joel Embiid and Paul George 100%. Maybe I'm being skeptical, but Paul George is what? He's 34, 35 right now.
Yeah.
He's had a pretty injury-riddled career. Joel Embiid is never healthy in the playoffs, it seems. And even last season, when he was playing, he played well, but he was also banged up. He was hobbling out there, and that was a big reason why the Knicks were able to take that series. I think if you get to those playoff rounds, I think I'd give the Knicks the edge simply because I don't think the Sixers are going to be healthy. And you can say the same thing about the Knicks. I mean, they entered that playoff series with OG Anunoby banged up, Julius Randle, out with the shoulder injury. But historically, Julius Randle is an available player. I think he's coming off this shoulder surgery, had that extension signed. So I think he has a lot of doubt how he's going to fit with the current crop of the Nova Knicks. But, you're talking about a 3-time All-Star, a guy who, he's coming off that surgery and he's been playing all 82 games every season before that. So I think the Knicks get the edge there. You mentioned the Bucks, though. I think everybody's sleeping on Giannis Antetokounmpo again. I mean, the guy is the best player, in my opinion, in the Eastern Conference. And you heard the rumblings about how Dame Lillard had a really rough season last year because the transition from Portland. First of all, it wasn't expected that he was going to go to Milwaukee. He went through the divorce. It was a really tough transition for him. I think he's going to rebound. So, if I were to make the Eastern Conference rankings, it would be 1 Boston, 2 New York, 3 Milwaukee, and then 4 Philadelphia.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point on Milwaukee, too, because it's a reminder of how, I know everyone, laughs at the East in comparison to the West, but I really think that's only when you're talking about, depth, top to bottom. If you're just talking about the top of each conference, the East goes toe-to-toe with the West and has the reigning champions. Boston, New York, Philly, Milwaukee is a really killer top 4. 2 of those teams are going to be out in the first 2 rounds. That's a really tough conference, and that's not even talking about teams like Cleveland or Orlando, who, again, they're what, the 5th and 6th best teams? Those teams are on track to lose in the first round. It's a tougher conference than people give it credit for, and I think Milwaukee's the perfect example of that, where people have kind of forgotten, okay, they've got one of the 2 or 3 best players on the planet. They've got Dame, who had a down year, but, if he's anything close to his usual self this year, they have one of the best 1-2 punches in the league. The East is tough, man.
And one team you're forgetting is Miami. I never want to see Eric Spoelstra in a playoff series if I am any team in the Eastern Conference. I mean, they might coast during the regular season, and Jimmy Butler might coast during the regular season, but once they get to the playoffs, they're very dangerous out. So yeah, I mean, the Eastern Conference is deep, and the West, the West for me, I think it's got to be Denver still. That's my team coming out of there. I don't know who you think.
I think it's OKC, man. Listen, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's Denver. They have the best player in the world, in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinion, and still a supporting cast around them. But, they've slowly lost pieces with the cap crunch the last couple of years, and I just think for how good OKC already was, they were the youngest 1 seed ever, youngest playoff series winner ever, and then to go get Hartenstein to kind of remedy the few weaknesses they had with size and rebounding, and to already be an elite defensive team, and then go get arguably the best perimeter defender in the league in Alex Caruso. I just think that's a team with basically no holes anymore. An MVP caliber superstar leading a deep cast. J-Dub and Chet should only be getting better. Health obviously plays a factor, but I look at that team in the West and I'm just like, I don't think they have a hole or anything to exploit. Like, I just think they're the best team top to bottom in the West.
I understand what you're saying. To me, there's a progression to winning a championship, and I don't think that the OKC Thunder are ready yet.
Yeah.
They're still about 2 years away from first they got to get to the conference finals. They got to figure out all the challenges that come with that, and then they're gonna really hit their stride and their peak as a roster probably in 2 years. But I don't think they're ready for the championship yet.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there's a reason a team that young has never done it, because you kind of got to take your lumps before you can make it to the top of the mountain. Last Knicks thing I wanted to ask you about, and you had kind of touched on it a little bit when you were talking about Julius Randle and how he fits with the Nova boys now and this new look Knicks team. Looking at things like, the rest of the core is under long-term control. I know that doesn't always mean anything, but Julius Randle only has one guaranteed year left on his contract. In my opinion, I thought the best thing for him was the RJ Barrett trade. I thought that freed him up and created more space on the court for Randle to be his best. Now you bring in Bridges. Like, is there any sense at all that he might be the odd man out here? Or is that not even like a topic or discussion in New York right now? And it's just like, no, full steam ahead with this roster. We're trying to win like this.
No, that's definitely part of it. And when you mean odd man out, does that mean he's going to get traded? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, potentially traded or just not there for the long haul. Like maybe he just plays out this year, his contract ends and he's gone a year from now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Knicks are going to let him walk for nothing. And if they feel like that is the direction that it's going, they're going to try to trade him. But yeah, for sure, that's been the talk. Not only now, that's been the talk for a while. Julius Randle has had a very complicated relationship with the New York market and the Knicks. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but when they signed him, he was considered a consolation prize for Kevin Durant. They were supposed to get Kevin Durant. They didn't get him. And they basically issued a public apology when they signed Julius Randle. And then he had a great year. He had a down year first. He had a great year during the pandemic. Came back the following season, and that's when he really struggled. He had the thumbs down to the fans when he made sure to explain what that meant, which wasn't positive.
Because they were booing him, right?
Took some. They booed him. He put his thumbs down and he said that means shut the F up. And he said that about the fans. So that obviously did not garner a positive reaction from the fan base. There was talk at that point about they need to trade this guy. He came back the following season. Jalen Brunson really benefited from playing alongside him, became an all-star again. Then, last season really reinvented his game where it wasn't so much, all right, dribble, take a three-pointer. It became, I got to get to the hoop. And it really boosted his efficiency. To me, it showed that he could fit in with what the Knicks are doing. Because if you look back at January of last season, they were the New York Knicks were the best team in the NBA in January. And that was really the only time when they had Jalen, Julius, and OG Anunoby healthy. And I think they went 14-2 or something like that. It was the best month, that the Knicks had since the 90s. Then he gets hurt. He falls over. Mohamed I can't pronounce his name. Jaquez on the Miami Heat.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
Junior. Yeah, the rookie, last year's rookie.
Yeah. So he falls over him, and then it becomes like, all right, well, the Knicks are gonna obviously struggle. They didn't struggle as much as people thought, and then now the narrative starts to build. They don't need Julius Randle. Maybe he's a hole offensively, but to me, I look back at January. And I say that is when the Knicks were at their peak. Jalen Brunson, despite his heroics in the playoffs, he needed another scorer out there. And that's when against the Pacers, and we saw it against the Sixers, that's when they needed Julius Randle. I think he's going to benefit this team. And trading him, I don't think his value is where the Knicks, want him to be, because I think around the league he's viewed as not a winning player, not a player that they're going to, give up a ton of assets for. So I think the best course of action for the Knicks is to go into this season, give Julius Randle a try, see if they can recreate what happened in January. And then if it doesn't work out, then you explore the trade market, before the February deadline.
Yeah, Randall in general as a player, he's like such a fascinating case study because yeah, on one hand, sometimes I think he's one of those guys like you don't know what you have till it's gone, right? Like you mentioned before last season, a super durable player, always available, toughs it out. For the most part, plays harder than that one year when that was called into question, but like puts up numbers, has been part of winning teams, always available, can't ask for much more. And then yeah, then there's another part where like you said, it feels like he's not a winning player. Something about the way it looks, it's like it looks more difficult than it should be. His shot's not consistent, and there's reasons you can think it doesn't fit on a winning team. But yeah, I just think on both sides, he's such a fascinating case study, especially in the modern age of analytics and the way things are going and the certain shots you want to prioritize. Randall doesn't always fit in that mold, but then you can't deny the numbers and the
Mhm.
productivity.
Yeah, and listen, I think he got better last season at moving the ball and being more
Yep.
efficient. And I think people, when they look back at Julius Randle, they look at his previous seasons and say, "Hey, that's not gonna the way he plays that ISO ball is not gonna fit in what the Knicks are trying to do." But then they don't look at what he was doing last season, which was really efficient ball. I mean, he was an all-star last season, and yeah, Jalen Brunson took over. He's now the team captain. I do wonder. I mean, this used to be Julius's team, right? He was the face of the franchise, right? Starting with that pandemic year. And now, Jalen has really taken over. Obviously, they had this huge press conference in August. I've never seen. I've been covering the NBA for a while. I've never seen a press conference to announce a team captain. So they made a big deal out of this. It's very clear Jalen Brunson is now the face of this team. I do wonder if they're how Julius is going to react to that. I don't, I can't get in his head. I don't know. Will there be any jealousy? Will there be any thoughts? Hey, they're abandoning me. They're not thinking about me anymore. They don't want to give me a contract extension. They get, Jalen took his contract extension. I don't get the max. So yeah, there's a possibility of some discord being there, but I just, I don't know. I'm just,
Yeah.
setting up, the possibility there.
Yeah, and I do think that also makes, the early season all that much more fascinating if we do see him playing some small ball center because I'm really interested to see what that looks like in some extended run.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the way the NBA is going anyway. I mean, you're gonna have situations where he's gonna be playing against a backup five, and he just has to guard the 3-point line because the other team's spacing the floor, and he can do that. So then you're not giving up, the rim protection that Tom Thibodeau really covets as much. Now, listen, I do think that Tom's gonna look at Julius Randle defending at the five, and it's gonna drive him crazy, and
Yeah.
he's not gonna want to do it because he really was. I mean, he had Obi Toppin as really this coveted rookie, and he refused to play him together with Julius Randle because of the rebounding component, because of the rim protecting component. And basically, what happened is Obi Toppin had to be traded because there was no time for him to play because Tom did not want to play Julius Randle at center. Now he's going to have to be forced to do it. I think it helps that he has OG Anunoby, who's a top tier defender on the floor with Julius Randle, kind of covers up a lot of those holes. And also Mikal Bridges is a top tier defender on the perimeter. So I think this roster better matches Julius Randle playing center than the previous rosters. With that being said, I don't think, like I said, Tom's not going to want to do it for very long.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting story to monitor early in the season for a number of reasons. Tom Thibodeau being one of them. All right, I know you cover the Knicks, and what I'm about to ask you is more of a Nets story, but yeah, you're a New York guy. I'm sure you know enough about the story. Ben Simmons, quote unquote, fully
Okay.
cleared again for as training camp looms
Okay.
after his second back procedure. In general, we know about how unavailable he's been since he got to Brooklyn and really for most of his career. Um, at this point in Ben Simmons' career, like, does the fact that he has been fully cleared mean anything to you in terms of like, oh, maybe we'll see, the original Ben Simmons? Because to me personally, I'm past that. I'm like, okay, fully cleared means
Yeah.
he's healthy right now, but he's gonna be what he's been the last couple of years. He's gonna be afraid to get to the free. I think he's averaged one free throw attempt per game the last couple of years. 6 points, 6 rebounds, sixes, like in that range. A complete zero on offense. To me, the fact he's fully cleared means nothing.
I mean, yeah, with Ben Simmons is now, I don't care what you say, you got to show me.
Yeah.
Because I've heard this before, heard about how he's dedicated now and how he's fully healthy and he's going to be an all-star again. It's all a bunch of crap to me at this point. You've got to show me and actually get on the court. And you're right. I mean, the guy gets on when he does get on the court. he seems like he doesn't want to be there. He's terrified to even look at the basket. I remember watching some Nets games. He would dribble up the floor and just get inside the paint and turn around and just hand the ball off to somebody because, like, I don't even want to look at that basket because I'm terrified. Now, listen, the guy was an incredible talent with the Sixers. He was an all-star, and he's still in his prime. If he somehow gets in the headspace where he's like, oh, my God, this is awesome. I love basketball, and I want to be out there, it's possible he can recreate what he did with the Sixers. But you got to show me. I don't want to hear anything else about him being fully invested and fully healthy because I don't believe it. I won't believe it until I see it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the only thing that maybe makes this year different, he is on an expiring contract, and if he does want to get paid, I mean, he's never going to make what he's making now. He's making $40.3 million this year. He's not getting anything close to that again. But if he wants a contract at all, he's going to have to show something this year. But I'm with you. One of the funniest things I saw, and I don't remember who tweeted it, but it was a couple days ago I saw, and it was like the stages of the NBA offseason. You know, it's like the draft and free agency and summer league and all these things. And then at one point, it's like Ben Simmons healthy was like one of the stages, or Ben Simmons ready to play or something like that was one of the stages of every offseason. That it's like you know where you are in the NBA calendar when. I thought that was pretty funny.
Like clockwork, man.
Yeah,
every year at this point. And that means, you're right, me being in this market, I'm exposed to it a little bit more, and I don't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah,
the guy's been in street clothes ever since he got to the Nets.
Yeah, 50-something games played in like the last 2.5 years. All right, last thing before I let you go. Not sure if you saw Vlade Divac's comments a couple of days ago about how essentially the jury is still out on whether he made a mistake passing on Luka Doncic in the draft. Essentially, he said something along the lines of like, well, you know, we had De'Aaron Fox at the time who had the ball in his hands, same position, and you know, I thought De'Aaron Fox could be a franchise guy, and he still could be. It looks like I'm wrong right now, but it might not be the case. This is so ridiculous. I don't even want to ask, oh, just what are your thoughts? Because I think everyone knows it is an absolute clown commentary. But what I do want to ask you is it possible, come April, May, June, we're talking about this being the dumbest thing that was said in the NBA this year? And I know, look, there'll be a lot of dumb things said over the course of an NBA season with, you know, the media circus that this league is. But I think this might stand as one of the dumbest, perhaps the dumbest things said all year.
Yeah, so wait, he's saying that the jury's still out whether Marvin Bagley is a better player than Luka Doncic. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, he didn't specify that taking Bagley was still, you know, up in the air, but he's saying that the general idea of them not drafting Luka Doncic, you can't fully say it was a mistake yet because they had De'Aaron Fox, and that's why they didn't draft Luka. And it's so ass backwards, it's insane.
Yeah, and that also implies that he's such a bad GM that he couldn't figure out a way for De'Aaron Fox and Luka Doncic to play together. Like, it's like, freaking, who's Luka Doncic playing with now? Kyrie Irving. He can't play with another point guard. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. And if you look back at Vlade Divac's tenure as a general manager there, it was pretty much always a disaster. I mean, the running joke at the time was, you better do a trade with the Sacramento Kings because you're going to come out on top. And I understand, like, the owner was, you know, rumors of the owner being heavily involved in influencing him, you know, influencing everything over there. But yeah, I mean, you cannot defend taking Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic. And if you try, you're going to look ridiculous. I get it. He's got to say something. I don't know, man. That's just a terrible take. Obviously, I don't know. It's one of the worst. I mean, it's one of the worst draft picks in history, right? At this point, I mean, it's like, it reminds me of when the Blazers guys were saying, well, we didn't pick Michael Jordan because we had Clyde Drexler. Yeah, I mean, that was pretty stupid. So you ended up with Sam Bowie, and it was a disaster. So I mean, I don't know, it's dumb.
And I think it's especially dumb to say it in 2024, in the 21st century, in the modern game, when we know how positionless the modern game is. We know, like you said, guys can coexist even if they're both ball dominant. Like, you just figure it out. It's such an indictment on like your own basketball IQ and creativity to be like, well, we got a guy that needs the ball, or we think he needs the ball. And yes, this generational prospect who's probably better than the guy we have is coming out, but you know, they both have the ball. Like, just draft the best guy and figure out the rest later. Right. Maybe you got to trade one of them. Maybe it works, but to not draft him because it's like, wow, he might not fit with the guy we got now. It's just so insane to me. This is one of those things where after I saw the quote graphic, I had to like desperately try to find the clip or the original source because I was like, no, this has to be taken out of context. Like, there's no way he said this, but he did.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been better off just saying, "Listen, I screwed up. That
Yeah.
was terrible," and then just end it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could say that a lot of things in the Vlade Divac era. Anyway.
Yeah, it was a bad era, man.
Yeah.
Bad Sacramento Kings era, but now they're playing pretty well in
Yeah.
part. And he could have. I get it. Like a lot of these GMs, they deflect. They instead of bringing up Marvin Bagley, he was able to like somehow pivot and say, "Well, I took De'Aaron Fox." So he's trying to tell everybody that he made a good draft pick. And I guess De'Aaron Fox is working out pretty well for them now, but he's no Luka Doncic. That's for sure.
Exactly. All right. Yeah. I mean, there'll be plenty more of ridiculous things said by GMs and people around the NBA over the next year. We'll have plenty to talk about. Stefan, thanks so much for joining us, man. For all of our listeners and viewers, you can follow along with Stefan's work covering the Knicks all season for the New York Post. Maybe if you're in town in Toronto with the Knicks on a road trip or something, we can have you stop by the studio. That'd be great. But until then, man, thanks so much for joining us, Stefan.
All right, man. I got to check the schedule again, but we're in Toronto twice a year, so I'll hit you up.
Great. Thanks. All right. For Stefan Bondy in New York, for Zach and Adrian in the control room, I'm Joseph Casciaro. This has been the Unfiltered Show. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.